the solution for humanity.
اقرأ ورتل القرآن اصدح بصوتك اسمع الأكوان اقرأ كلام الله داوي نفوسنا لنحس في أعماقنا الإيمان كالحجارة قسوة فإذا القرآن حين لانا كم من فؤاد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت الجواد الكريم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another in our series, Reflections on the Qur'an. In our last episode, we were discussing arguments in the Qur'an, and in particular, at the end, we're talking about an article, very thought-provoking and interesting article by Professor Mustansir Mir, in which he discusses certain kinds of logical errors, flawed arguments that the Qur'an calls attention to as being flawed. And we didn't finish all of them. There was just one that I wanted to refer to today, which is responding to an argument that wasn't made by the other side. So disproving something that actually wasn't part of the argument. So it looks like you've made a point, whereas it's irrelevant to the topic under discussion. And the example that Professor Mir gives with that is this discussion of Isa alayhi salam. It says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولما ضرب ابن مريم مثلا إذا قومك منه يصدون وقالوا أآلهتنا خير أم هو ما ضربوه لك إلا جدلا بل هم قوم خصمون. When the son of Mary is cited as an example, your people laugh and jeer, saying, our God's better, or is he? They cite him only to challenge you. They are a contentious people. So they're arguing with the Prophet ﷺ based on a position that he never took, a position that Christians took, that Jesus is God, but that's not what the Qur'an was saying. And so they're refuting an argument or ridiculing an argument that the Prophet ﷺ and that the Qur'an never made. So then, after mentioning Jesus as a deity, then they compare him to their deities and say that their deities are better. There's an example of this kind of argument that I ran across when I was doing research for my PhD thesis. There's one of the arguments that creationists make when debating with the proponents of Darwinian evolution is that one of the key ideas in Darwin's theory is that you have a series of small mutations which accumulate over generations and over eons, thousands of generations, and that these small incremental changes, as they add up, they give competitive advantage to those organisms that have them, and that after a while you get entirely new species by this process. So one of the counter arguments to that is the idea that if it takes, let's say, 9 or 10 genes to produce some organ, the classic example is the eye. So, the eye is composed of many components. And so the argument of the creationists was to say that the eye will not work unless all of the components are in place, and something like that wouldn't occur from one generation to the next like a leap. The argument that 5% of an eye is of no use to its possessor. Richard Dawkins is a famous proponent of classical Darwinian evolution, and he wrote a book called The Blind Watchmaker, in which he tackled this argument, and he said 5% vision is more useful than 100% vision, and even 1% vision is better than no vision, and 6% is better than 5%. So the argument that he was refuting there is not the argument that was being presented. The argument that was being presented was regard to 5% of an eye will not produce any vision. And so for him to try to refute it on the basis of 5% vision rather than 5% eye is an example of this kind of argument. That's a kind of a loose end from the last episode. Let's turn to the main topic of today's lesson, which is what the Qur'an has to say about natural phenomenon and its implications for natural sciences. In preparing this particular talk, I relied heavily on a chapter from a book by an Iranian physicist by the name of Mahdi Gulshani. The book is called The Qur'an and Natural Sciences. Now, there's no difference of opinion amongst Sunnis and Shi'is about these kind of issues. And so there's no haraj, there's no kind of problem at all with referring to the writing of a Shi'i, because this is an issue related in a tangential way to Aqidah, but it's not the points of Aqidah where the Sunnis and the Shi'is differ. So the author, Mahdi Gulshani, is a practicing physicist. I mean, that's his profession and his specialization. And he's got this deep interest in the relationship between the Qur'an and science. So he pointed out there's more than 750 verses in the Qur'an that either discuss some natural phenomenon or call people to investigate them. And if you look at the statements that the scholars of fiqh and usul al-fiqh have made regarding the number of verses in the Qur'an that have direct legal weight or that discuss legal issues, their estimate is roughly 500 verses that discuss legal issues. So you have almost 50% more verses that discuss natural phenomena than you do verses that discuss legal issues. So one of Gulshani's contributions is that he looked at them systematically, went through all these verses, and he identified subcategories from this large category, subcategories of what these verses were focusing on. And so the first thing that he mentions is verses that either describe constituent elements of objects or enjoin, meaning encourage people, human beings, to investigate their constituent elements. Allah says in Surah At-Tariq, فَلْيَنظُرِ الْإِنسَانُ مِمَّا خُلِقَ. Let the human being consider or examine what he is made of. And this verb nadara, yanzuru, means, on its most literal level, it means to look at or to gaze at. The other meaning that's derived from it means to investigate in order to dispel ignorance, or to investigate in order to make something that's hidden manifest. And another verse in which Allah actually tells us something about constituent components of living things, وَاللَّهُ خَلَقَ كُلَّ دَابَةٍ مِّن مَّاءٍ. Allah has created every dabba, every creature that moves by its own volition, He's created every dabba from water. And in another verse, إِنَّا خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ مِن نُطْفَةٍ أَمْشَاجٍ نَبْتَلِيهِ فَجَعَلْنَاهُ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. Indeed, we create man from a drop of mingled fluid to test him. So we make him hearing, knowing. So the investigation that's kind of being hinted at there, I mean, people have examined that mingled fluid, and indeed, one of the ways to understand it is the actual, just the semen that is emitted by a man, and that consists of various fluids that are added to the overall fluid as it passes through the tubes that lead to its emission. We're going to take a break and be back, inshallah.
A servant is not afflicted with any punishment greater than having a stiff heart and being away from the Almighty, the Compassionate. Hearts are God's vessels on the earth. The most beloved ones to Him are the softest and the most purest. If hearts are nourished with God's remembrance and quenched with His meditation, it will witness great wonders and deep wisdom. Since our hearts are enlaced with layers of oblivion, we need to cleanse them to stand sound and pure before Allah. To know more, join us on Peace TV's new series on healing hearts, where we can join together the caravan of the sincere servants of Allah.
Let's try and purify our hearts from all destructive sins to taste true success in Healing Hearts. Every Thursday at 6 p.m. and repeat telecast at 5:30 a.m. India on Peace TV. Osama El Shami.
How can we get our children ready for the month of Ramadan?
Sharing the stories of what the Muslims have been through in the past, in particular the first generation.
Nazir Irfan Al Mujahid.
Make this Ramadan very special to them.
Your taqwa, your righteousness, your goodness.
I want you to tell me about your experiences from the very first Ramadan that you experienced as a new Muslim.
The first Ramadan I experienced was amazing.
Umar Debua.
When I embraced Islam, it was like I was prepared. You know, Allah prepared me for something that I had no idea. It was an amazing experience. Beautiful.
My dear brothers and sisters in Islam, welcome to our program, The Straight Path.
Build your character on the path of the Qur'an and Sunnah in The Straight Path. Every Wednesday and Saturday at 3 p.m. and repeat telecast at 1 a.m. India on Peace TV.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Welcome back. So we're talking about the verse that talks about mingled fluid, that which human beings are made of. And so the sperm itself is a mingled fluid, and then you can also look at the mingled fluid as being the fluid of the man mingling with the fluid of the woman. A second area that Gulshani identified as a topic of Quranic verses on natural phenomena, verses that either give an account of the manner of creation of material objects or enjoin people to discover their genesis. For example, هو الذي خلق السماوات والأرض في ستة أيام وكان عرشه على الماء. He is the one who created the heavens and earth in 6 days, and his throne was upon the water. So of course there's all kinds of questions about what that means, and some of those issues are not amenable to empirical investigation. One that is really clearly amenable to it, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Will they not consider or look at the camel, how it was made? وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ. at the heaven or the sky, how it was lifted or elevated. وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ. And the mountains, how they were erected. And وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ. And at the earth, how it was spread. So all of these are calling upon us to look at those phenomena and derive lessons from them. We don't have the time to go into it now, but when you look at the way that a camel is designed, I mean, every aspect of its being has some design feature that adapts it to this harsh desert environment in which it lives. And the third category is verses in which man is enjoined to discover how our physical universe came into existence. أَوَلَمْ يَرَوْا كَيْفَ يُبْدِئُ اللَّهُ الْخَلْقَ ثُمَّ يُعِيدُهُ. Do they not see how Allah produces creation, then reproduces it? And in the same surah, Surah Al-Ankabut, something that's even more focused on actually going and looking for evidence. قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانظُرُوا كَيْفَ بَدَأَ الْخَلْقِ. Say, travel in the land and see how He, meaning Allah, how He originated creation. So traveling in the earth. So, I mean, this is practically a direct encouragement for paleontology, looking into the earth and seeing the process of creation. That requires traveling in the earth. Number 4, verses in which man is enjoined to study natural phenomena. Just in the interest of time, let me read the English. Have you not seen how Allah has sent down water from the sky and has caused it to penetrate the earth as water springs, and afterward thereby produces crops of diverse hues, and afterward they wither and you see them turn yellow, then He makes them chaff. Indeed, herein verily is a reminder for men of understanding. So He's calling our attention to these processes, the interaction of water, the earth, vegetation, the stages that the vegetation goes through in its life cycle. And a very famous passage that's frequently cited in these kind of discussions, again, I'll just read the translation. Indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the difference of night and day, and the ships which run upon the sea with what is of use to men, and the water which Allah sends down from the sky, thereby reviving the earth after its death, and dispersing all kinds of beasts therein, and in the ordinance of the winds and the clouds obedient between heaven and earth, are signs of Allah for people, لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ, people who use their minds. And then there's a whole large category of verses in which Allah swears by various natural objects. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, by the sun in its morning brightness. وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا, and by the moon as it follows the sun. وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا, by the day as it displays the sun's glory. وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا, and by the night as it conceals it. وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا, by the sky and how He built it. وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا, and by the earth and how He spread it. And then there's this passage in Surah Al-Waqi'ah, this oath that Allah mentioned as being a tremendous oath if you only understood. فَلَا أُقْسِمُ بِمَوَاقِعِ النُّجُومِ وَإِنَّهُ لَقَسَمٌ لَوْ تَعْلَمُونَ عَظِيمٌ. I swear by the positions of the stars, a tremendous oath if you only knew. And the tremendousness of that oath really became apparent only in the 20th century, when the large telescopes were built in the 1920s. Palomar Observatory in California, it's like a 200-inch telescope. Because of the size of that telescope, it was able to capture images that nobody had been able to see before. And because of that, they were able to determine that most objects in the universe are moving away from the Earth. And it also became clear that we're part of a galaxy, and that there are many, many other galaxies, more than we can count, which are also out there, and that they're moving away from the Earth. And by a process of deduction, etc., some kind of knowledge was arrived at distances between stars and between galaxies, and from that, some sense of how long it takes light to arrive to the Earth from some of those more distant galaxies. And the implication of that is the position of all objects in the sky are not where they are in real time, because maybe it took 1,000,000 years or 1,000,000,000 years for the light of some object to reach the Earth. And so what we're seeing now is a snapshot back in time. And where those objects are now, we can't see their current location just because of the limits of the speed of light. So Allah swore by the locations or the positions of the stars and called our attention to what a tremendous oath that is. So that's another aspect. Number 6, verses in which, by reference to some natural phenomena, the possibility of the occurrence of resurrection is explained. We talked about this in a previous episode. I'll just read one passage in English that calls our attention to this phenomenon, makes this analogy. In Surah Al-Hajj, people, if you doubt the resurrection, remember that we created you from dust, then a drop of fluid, then a clinging form, this alaq, then a lump of flesh, both shaped and unshaped. We mean to make our power clear to you. Whatever we choose, we cause to remain in the womb for an appointed time. Then we bring you forth as infants, and then you grow and reach maturity. Some die young, and some are left to live on to such an age that they forget all that they once knew. You sometimes see the earth lifeless, yet when we send down water, it stirs and swells and produces every kind of joyous growth. This is because Allah is the truth. He brings the dead back to life. He has power over everything. So the first analogy is referring to these stages of human development, both in the womb and in the world. And then the analogy of the dead earth and the rain causing it to come to life. So the one who has power to do all of those things has also the power to return human beings to existence after their death. Now, there's also verses that emphasize the thoroughness and orderliness of the creation of Allah. In the famous example in Surah Al-Mulk, الذي خلق سبع سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير. It is He who created the 7 heavens, one above the other. You will not see any flaw or any discrepancy in what the Lord of mercy creates. Look again. Can you see any flaw? Look again and again. Your sight will turn back to you weak and defeated. And then in Surah Al-Furqan, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ فَقَدَّرَهُ تَقْدِيرًا, created everything and meted out for it a measure. So the sense of the precision by which everything in the universe has been made. And this brings to mind the anthropic principle that all of the values of natural laws in nature are so precise. If they were a little bit off, a little bit different, there wouldn't be any life on earth. And then there are verses that explain the harmony in which man lives with the rest of the physical universe and the subservience of what is in the earth and in the heavens to man. هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَ لَكُم مَّا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا. Allah is the one who created everything on the earth for you. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُم مَّا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا مِّنْهُ. He has put to service everything that is in the heavens and in the earth for you. All of it is from Him. And then one final issue that he didn't mention, but that I would call attention to also, is with regard to history and archaeology. There's verses that encourage people to travel in the land in order to see what happened to those before us. قُلْ سِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلُ كَانَ أَكْثَرُهُمْ مُشْرِكِينَ. Say, travel through the land and see how those before you met their end. Most of them were idolaters. Now, the cumulative effect of all of these verses is to indicate that these things that we see in the world around us are real, and that they are a means that we should study, and from looking at the world around us to move from an awareness of the physical universe to an awareness of what is beyond and behind the physical universe. We've reached the end of this episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wallahu a'lam.
اقرأ أخيا